Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to Nectar, Sex, and Soul. I'm your host, Sureya, and I'm a holistic sex and relationship coach. This is a chance for us to get intimate, to reach far into the mystical, magical, erotic, tender, inspiring, vital, primordial depths of what it is to be human, what it is to express and inhabit these amazing bodies fully, and what it is to make love to the divine in everything we do. We'll be penetrating deeply into the nectar of what it is to be alive and turned on by life, how to transmute pain and hardship into pleasure and medicine, how to embody the union of polarities, including sex and spirit, and how to love every piece of ourselves wholeheartedly. This is a space where we don't just talk about the act of sex, but rather how sexual energy permeates every area of our lives as the seed of creation and the source from which we all came. Exploring sexuality in this way not only takes our sex lives to the next level, but is a catalyst for a life that turns us on in each and every moment, not just in the bedroom. Within you stirs a sexual vitality that is capable of so much more than you could possibly imagine. This is what we explore on Nectar, Sex, and Soul. Thanks for coming to play. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Nectar, Sex, and Soul with Sureya. It's such a pleasure to have you all here today. Today, we are going to be talking about cultivating sexual sovereignty and living a turned-on life. So what is sexual sovereignty and what does it mean to live a turned-on life? Sexual sovereignty is about taking ownership and radical self-responsibility for being at choice in and cultivating freedom in our sexual fulfillment. And living a turned-on life means that we are feeling lit up and alive, vital, present, immersed in the richness of each moment, and not in a way like, oh, life is just full of sunshine and rainbows. It's about bringing our full presence and attention and humanity to each moment and really immersing ourselves in the fullness of each moment. So what do these two things have to do with each other? So you've heard me say that our sexual energy is our vitality, our life force, that energy that we're created from, that is pulsing through all of creation. So if we are in a place of disconnection or numbness or repression or dependence or distraction or addiction, any of these things with our sexual energy, if we're feeling controlled by somebody else in our sexual energy, we're not sexually sovereign, and that's going to dim our ability to live a fully turned on life. And I'm going to unpack sexual sovereignty a lot more in terms of what that means, what it is, how we can cultivate it, and how it feeds in to living a turned on life. So a lot of us are numb or living on autopilot, distracted, lacking presence, not really knowing how to follow our hearts, our full yes. And so we're not living turned on lives. We feel shut down and disconnected in some way. And we're going to be diving into how to shift that in connection with sexual sovereignty. And one of the things I want to say is that when I speak to sexual energy and pleasure, I'm not referring to just explicitly sexual activity and pleasure. Sexual energy is permeating everything, right? So I just said that's what we're made out of. And pleasure is available to us in each moment. We are sensual beings. We live in human bodies, in a material plane, on this beautiful earth, and we can open to the sensual fullness of life in each moment. So you've heard me speak before how Tantra is very much about working with the body as a pathway to awakening, rather than looking at the body and the five senses as an obstacle to it. So pleasure and presence and being with the sensations in our body, and not even just pleasure, but being with our pain too, being with the full spectrum in between, because they are very deeply connected. Our ability to feel is so deeply connected to our capacity for living a turned on life. And so by intentionally immersing ourselves in this sensual experience, we are nourishing our vitality, our bodies, and our nervous systems. Okay, so let's unpack sexual sovereignty a bit further. A big piece of sexual sovereignty is about being able to fill your own cup rather than projecting your needs onto your lover or onto other people or onto the need for a lover. And this is something most people don't think to do because we're not conditioned in this way, right? We're programmed to think we need another person to meet us in this way. And while, of course, it is delicious and amazing to have another person to share our sexual energy with, if we are dependent on that, we can be stuck in this place of lack and grasping and needing another person to fill a void. And this can lead to all kinds of problems like sexual frustration. It can put a lot of strain on relationships. It can lead us to make choices that maybe are not for our highest, that maybe are not in our highest alignment. So even if we have a lover, they might not be in the mood at the same time as us, right? And there's something to be said for being able to stir the pot and cultivate that energy. Sometimes we do want to lean in, even if we're not in the mood, because we want to nurture that connection. And sometimes showing up to connect with our sexual energy is about doing so because we know it's good for us and we want to keep that water flowing. And I'll be talking about that more later in this episode, but sometimes it's just not the time. Our body's saying no, we're not in the mood, we don't have the time. And to pressure our lover into meeting us when they're not feeling in the mood, or to be pressured when we're not feeling in the mood, is going to override the body, which we never want to do because that's actually going to create sexual closing. So if you have a partner that you pressure or guilt into having sex with you, or if you've been on the receiving end of that, you know it doesn't feel good to be on the receiving end of it. And if you've been on the side where you're trying to convince someone to have sex with you, just know that you are actually creating closing and armoring in their body and can be triggering a fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response. Most likely fawn. A lot of times people will go into sexual fawning when they feel obligated to meet someone sexually rather than it coming from a genuine place of inspiration and desire to connect. So sometimes our partner is not available. Sometimes we don't have a partner. Sometimes we don't want the same type of sex. We're not into the same things in that moment. So having a way that we can fill our cup rather than being dependent upon somebody to do that for us all the time is so essential to us feeling fulfilled, it's essential for a healthy relationship, making sure we're not crossing boundaries and being able to take care of ourselves, right? That's a very sexy quality. It's not sexy when somebody is being sexually needy, when it feels like they need us to fill that void, or they're dependent on us to be okay, or to have a release, or to feel validated or desired. Obviously, if we are in a relationship where we never feel desired and we don't feel like our sexual needs are ever met, there's something deeper that we need to look at there. And this is very common. If your lover is not ever wanting to have sex with you, there are deeper things that we need to look into in the relationship. But if it's just sometimes you guys aren't on the same page, that's natural, that's normal, and we need to have ways that we can take care of ourselves in that situation. So sexual sovereignty is not only about taking self-responsibility for our sexual fulfillment, but also for our own turn-on. So yes, we want to be able to ask our lover for the things that are going to provide sexual satisfaction. We need to be able to express our desires and feel like many of those are met. But we can't expect that our sexual fulfillment is completely the other person's responsibility. If we are turned off, if we're living a turned off life, if we have a bunch of trauma we haven't worked through, if we are exhausted and burnt out, if our dopamine receptors are fried because we've been watching too much porn or social media or whatever, if there's something within us that is not turned on and we're expecting our lover to be able to turn us on and to gratify our sexual fulfillment, the relationship is going to start to lose polarity, and it's likely that there will be resentment. So recognizing that your orgasm, your sexual pleasure, and your turn on are your responsibility is a huge act of reclaiming your sexual sovereignty. We don't want to expect your lover to carry a dead weight or fill a void. So if you're coming to them as cold water, you're not bringing any turn on to the table. You're not feeling alive and turned on by life. And you're just like, hey, I need you to light me up. I need you to be the reason I experience pleasure and feel turned on. I need you to boil cold water that I'm bringing you. That's not going to feel magnetic, attractive, exciting to them. And you're making them do a lot of work that is actually your work to do. So learning to source turn on from within rather than outsourcing is really important here. So for most people, that's a really foreign concept. Most people need to use porn or fantasy in order to self-pleasure. There's nothing wrong with that. Know that when I speak to porn, I'm never shaming anyone, but I'm illuminating another way of doing things. So a lot of people can be in this place of grasping for something external to turn them on and to get them off. If you find yourself being aroused by another person, remember that sexual energy, that arousal you're feeling is coming from you. Okay? They didn't create that energy within you. They just stirred it within you. They were the reflection that awakened your sexual energy. They inspired something. But understanding that sexual energy is within you, you can look at that and get curious about how can I awaken my own sexual energy? How can I derive my turn on from myself, from life, from my body, from being alive? That's a radical act of sexual sovereignty that is incredibly magnetic. So if you listened to my episode about the number one quality that makes anyone irresistibly attractive, you'll remember me talking about being able to fill our cup with source and how somebody that can do that, that is in touch with the divine, that is coursing through their veins, that is pulsing through all existence. This is a very magnetic quality. If you can't get turned on by yourself, how are you going to expect somebody else to get turned on by you? Do you see how this works? We need to be able to source that turn on from within. So there's a big difference between being alive, turned on, and generous in your expression of sexual energy. I say generous meaning it's coming from an overflowing cup. It's not coming from an empty cup that you're desperately trying to get somebody to fill. There's an abundance of sexual energy moving through you. And that's going to feel so different than this grasping neediness of needing somebody else to feel that. And people can feel that, whether this is your lover, whether it's somebody that you're interested in. If you're coming with that grasping energy, it's likely going to repel them unless they are feeling validated by feeling desired, unless they are using you to validate their self-worth. And a lot of people use relationship and sex to validate their self-worth, and then we're just using each other. It's a mutual masturbation. We're not actually entering into a union that's going to be healthy and fulfilling. So sexual sovereignty is an act of claiming pleasure as your birthright and fully inhabiting your existence as a sexual being and recognizing that you have your own relationship with your unique sexual energy. It doesn't exist for someone else. It exists first and foremost for you. It's the stuff that you're made out of. It's how you got here. And you get to choose who you share that with as a gift. So I've talked with a lot of women. A lot of my clients have felt like their sexual energy is just there for their man if they're in a heterosexual relationship. And this is something that a lot of us are programmed to believe through porn. It's often not focused on female pleasure at all. I've heard a lot of women say that they've felt their pleasure was totally irrelevant based upon what they learned from porn. And this manifests in a lot of people's relationships. So there are a lot of women who have felt like sex is an obligatory duty, a chore that they have to offer their man, and that it's for him, and they've never been able to tap into their own sexual pleasure. They've never been able to feel into what they want and feel honored and like there's a reciprocity there. And that's going to make their body shut down more and more and be more resistant to having sex and less able to open to pleasure. So sexual sovereignty is hugely about claiming that this energy is for you and getting to know your own body so that you can learn what you want and then ask for what you want. It's really hard to communicate what you want if you don't know, right? And it's hard to know what you want if you've never explored your own body, or if you've never had a lover that's been particularly curious and generous in exploring your body. But even if they would love to give you pleasure, and they're so curious and proactive about that, but you don't know your own body, or you're coming to the table with cold water, again, you're making them do a lot more work that is yours to do. We want to meet them halfway, right? That's what relationship is about. Another really amazing thing about sexual sovereignty is that when you know how to fill your own cup, you set your standards high enough to not let someone in out of desperation. If you're in a place of feeling super horny or sexually unmet and you don't know how to meet your own needs, or you're using sex to validate your worth, you can end up getting in some situations and some relationships that you don't want to be in. I think a lot of people have experienced this before. And so if we are dependent on somebody else to meet that for us, we can lower our standards and let people in that we wouldn't otherwise. So sexual sovereignty is a way to really honor our worth and to give to ourselves what we are desiring. And by doing so, we're more likely to attract what we're desiring. So I want to unpack a little bit why so many of us find ourselves sexually frustrated or feeling numb in the first place. And a lot of this has to do with being turned off to life, operating on autopilot, not being present, being disconnected from our bodies. We live in a world that very much promotes this, right? We're so bombarded with constant distractions and cheap dopamine hits that fracture our attention span and disrupt our brain chemistry. So a lot of people are walking around numb, burned out, not paying attention to their bodies, and many of us are only experiencing a small slice of the spectrum of sensation that's available to us. And when we are overstimulated, we can tend to check out because it's too much for our nervous system. And then when we check out, we end up requiring intense stimulation to feel anything. And it can be really hard to direct our presence and maintain focus on anything. So there are a lot of things that can create desensitization in our sexual pleasure and our ability to feel sexually. So vibrators, porn, having sex while totally inebriated, mindless or goal-oriented masturbation, and trauma can all be at the root of numbing out. Many of us have conditioned ourselves to only be able to get off with high-intensity sensation and have desensitized ourselves to the more subtle realms of pleasure that can be infinitely deep and powerful. So vibrators don't resemble human touch and can drastically increase our tolerance for what's needed to bring us to orgasm. Porn shows us that hard pounding with little to no foreplay is the way, which can actually cause a woman's cervix to shut down in pain or numbness, rather than opening to orgasm if she's not fully turned on, relaxed, and open. Aggressive fucking and masturbation can also rub our most sensitive nerve endings raw, especially for circumcised penises that don't have the foreskin to help with preventing too much friction. So if we become dependent on high speed and pressure and friction to feel, we're going to desensitize ourselves. We're not going to be able to feel the subtlety and feel our lover. If we're dependent on inebriation to connect sexually, this can also disconnect us from our bodies and our ability to feel and stay present. And if we're chasing orgasm, that doesn't give us the ability to learn to listen and connect with our sexual energy, to have a dialogue with it, which we'll talk a bit more about in a little bit. And trauma causes the body to shut down to avoid pain and go numb. This is a huge cause of numbness. And it doesn't even have to be just trauma in the sense of being sexually violated. It could be the trauma of just a negative sexual experience where you felt ashamed or not good enough, or like you couldn't trust your lover. And another interesting thing is that our bodies can short circuit from pleasure that is too sharp and intense as well. So trauma happens when there's too much, too fast, too soon. And the body shuts down to avoid having to feel too much at once. We have the capacity to move enormous amounts of pleasure and energy through our systems. But if we can't relax and stay present with it and titrate, we can overload our system and desensitize ourselves in a way that we can't pick up on the more subtle sensations that can build and sustain in the most delicious of ways. When you give your body the time to build into highly pleasurable states, your entire body can become an erogenous zone, capable of sustaining unfathomable, profound, connected pleasure, to the point that you can orgasm from the feathery stroking of your thumbs or the sensual caress of your own breathing. I've experienced this to be true. I've seen this happen. Anything can be deeply orgasmic if we attune our body to the breath, to presence, to subtlety. If we can slow down and listen and work with the body rather than demanding of it. And this manifests everywhere, not just in the bedroom. If we eat a diet that's full of sugar, we won't be able to taste the sweetness that exists in something like an apple or a carrot. If we're used to looking at multiple screens at a time and keeping ourselves busy constantly, we're going to miss this. We're going to miss the subtle scent of the flowers and the warmth of the sun on our skin and the soft caress of a lover that can make our hair stand up. There are so many layers and textures of sensual pleasure, of fulfillment, of richness that we miss if we're not paying attention and if our nervous system is overstimulated. So back to the topic of talking with our sexual energy rather than at it. This is something that you heard me speak to a bit if you listened to the last episode on mindless versus mindful masturbation. But I want to unpack it a bit deeper here because it's so important. So sexual energy, like most people, responds much better when we talk with it rather than at it. I'm curious if you've ever opened up a conversation with your sexual energy. And if not, what do you think you might hear if you were to ask your sexual energy, what do you need? How are you doing? What's going on for you? What can I do for you? Right? A lot of us don't think to connect with our sexual energy or our body in this way. But sexual energy desires to be coaxed, flirted with, danced with. It's a dialogue with your life force. And when you create space to awaken and listen to the wisdom of this primordial essence, your experience expands to include vast realms of possibility you may have never thought possible. If our connection with our sexual energy is coming from a place of lack of presence, boredom, distraction, compulsiveness, the need for a quick release, or addiction, we often miss the depth of what it has to offer by demanding what we think we want. And when we approach it with intention and curiosity, we give space for it to blossom and express beyond the confines of its usual box. So take a moment to just reflect here. Let's just dive into this a little bit deeper. What kind of relationship do you have with your sexual energy? Is it a one-way street, paved with demands and expectations that it does what you want right when you want? Do you talk at it rather than with it? Do you listen and respond, or do you dominate the would-be conversation? Do you engage it regularly, or do you completely ignore it? Perhaps you only say hello when you're in the mood. Does it exist mostly in your head, in a world of fantasy, even if your body is still in action? Or is it deeply embodied in the here and now? Just taking a moment to reflect. So whatever your responses are, There's no wrong answer or shame, just simply an invitation to reflect upon how you relate with this source of magic that exists within you. Connecting with our sexual energy isn't just a matter of being in the mood or being fair weather friends. It's a coming home to our original essence, the source from which we came, drawing from this deep well of wisdom and vitality and channeling it into our greatest thriving. So where do we begin with cultivating sexual sovereignty, with learning to converse with our sexual energy, to open that dialogue, to be able to listen, and to live a fully turned on life? Where do we even start? One of the ways that I see as being essential to this process is working with an intentional self-pleasure practice or multiple self-pleasure practices. I don't just mean this in the sexual sense. That is absolutely one of the ways to do this, to directly connect with your genitals, with your sexual energy. And that's one of the ways that I'm referring to. And there are so many moments that we can find pleasure and turn on in, not just the bedroom. And we want to be able to immerse ourselves in the sensual richness of each moment and bring that to ourselves if we're feeling numb or tuned out. So that can be through all kinds of things, through moving our bodies, through slowing down with our food, through offering ourselves some nourishing touch, through dropping in with the sensual quality of the breath, getting out in nature and allowing the elements to tickle your skin. There's so many ways we can tap into this. And it's all connected to our sexual energy, to our sexual vitality. Self-pleasure is a way to awaken and connect with your own primordial essence, to cultivate an independent relationship with it, rather than only getting to know it in reference to your lover. And a lot of people throw this practice out when they get in relationship. They think, oh, I don't need to self-pleasure once I'm in relationship. That's just for people who are single. Why would I want to have sex with just myself when I have this lover? But I talked a lot earlier about why we would want to have this practice. There are so many reasons why we want to stay in connection with that practice. And one of them is so that we don't become sexually codependent. We do not want to cut ourselves off from that nourishment based upon where our lover is in each moment, right? We really want to stay connected to that. But I think one of the big problems is that a lot of people don't know how to do that in a fulfilling way. It feels so much more nourishing or enlivening or turned on to share that with a lover. But what if you could do that in a way that was beautifully enriching and enlivening and activating? What if you did have a self-pleasure practice that really filled your cup, and ways that you could allow that to permeate into each moment of your life, not just in the bedroom? If you're curious to resensitize and reawaken your electric capacity for pleasure, both in and out of the bedroom, then I want to invite you to join one of my upcoming courses. These are super short, sweet, potent, digestible courses. They're not a big commitment time-wise or financially. Very accessible, something that you can receive a lot of value from in a very short time. And you're going to spend minimal time on a screen because these are embodiment journeys. So you can take these practices, receive the transmissions, and go out and enjoy summer and get in your body. This is not about getting wrapped up in an online course. So the first one is Self-Pleasure for Mastery for Men. So this is a course that's going to teach you a new self-pleasure practice without porn and without fantasy, in a way that you are deriving your own turn on from within and working with your sexual energy in a whole new way. And so not only is this going to be much more fulfilling for you, it's also going to build vitality. It's going to train you to cultivate greater stamina, because a lot of people masturbate in a way that is rushing towards the finish line, and it's not training them to cultivate stamina at all. And then they expect to be able to last longer when they go share their sexual energy with a lover. But the way that we do one thing is the way we do everything. So if we're hurrying towards the finish line in our self-pleasure practice, the same thing is likely to happen when we're having sex with a lover. So this is also going to train you to start cultivating sexual mastery, learning to listen to your sexual energy, to be able to tune into the more subtle qualities, and then allow that to transfer to your experience with a lover. And this is for single and partnered men. Like I said, it's a super important practice, whether you are single or in a relationship. It's just going to enhance your experience with a lover. The second course I'm offering is called Venusian Pleasure Rituals for Women. And this one is focusing on being able to open to the pleasure that is available to us in each moment on a day-to-day basis. So practices that you can do to start and end your day, practices you can do to connect with your sexual energy, practices that you can do as a micro practice for just 10 to 30 seconds throughout your day, no matter what you're doing. And this is so important, especially for women, because we live in a very distorted masculine society that is in this false yang energy of go, 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 do, do, do. And nobody's body is meant for that, but especially not women's bodies. So being able to slow down and open to our sensual nature in each moment is so important, especially for those of us who are entrepreneurs or mamas or who work really hard, who are super busy, who are high achievers, and we tend to stuff our schedules full. This can be really draining on our bodies. And I know this so deeply from personal experience. I have struggled with chronic health issues for over half my life. And I know that in huge part, this is because I wasn't listening to my body. I was forcing myself to go and do way too much. And the practices that I'm sharing in this container are practices that help me to stay grounded in my body, in my pleasure, and to go about my day in a more feminine way, even though I'm still accomplishing so much. And I created this course because I need it just as much as everyone else. I've had to learn the necessity of these practices the hard way, and I'm so grateful to have them to support me, because I still slip into those patterns of going and pushing too much, especially when life gets hectic and throws unexpected curveballs. So it's really important to me that people have these tools to nourish themselves with pleasure and breath and embodiment practices and sexual energy. And I'm so excited to share these two courses with you. So you can find them in the show notes, or you can jump on my mailing list or go to sureyaleonara.com. Self-Pleasure for Mastery for Men begins on June 28th. And Venusian Pleasure Rituals for Women begins on July 7th. And the early bird for that will end on June 24th. That's a Friday. So space is limited. Everything is recorded in case you can't make it live. The men's course is much more of a self-paced course with a live Q&A to make sure that you have my personalized support and will have any of your questions answered and a space to share about your experience. And the women's course, we're going to meet live 3 times, but everything's recorded in case you can't make it live. And like I said, we're not going to be spending much time on a screen for either of these courses, because I want the focus to be on being in your body. So I would absolutely love to have you all join me for these courses. Really great way to just drop into the frequency of vitality and aliveness and turn on and sensual expression as we move into summer. And I trust that these journeys will breathe new life into every area of your life. And it would be such an honor to have you along for the journey with me. So if you're curious in that, go ahead and check out the show notes. Share this with anyone you think could benefit from either this episode or the classes. And as always, please leave a rating or review if you loved what you heard. Thank you so much for joining me on Nectar, Sex, and Soul today. I look forward to seeing you next time, and I look forward to getting to play with some of you in these upcoming courses. All right, beloveds, have a beautiful rest of your day. Sending all my love to you and encouraging you to really open to the pleasure, the sensory experience, the richness that is available to you in each and every moment. Ciao. Thank you so much for dropping into Nectar, Sex, and Soul with me today. It's been a pleasure to connect with you. If this episode lit you up or illuminated something impactful for you in some way, I invite you to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone you feel would love to hear it. To learn more about my work, check out sureyaleonara.com, sign up for my newsletter, and follow me on Instagram and YouTube, where I share tons of free content, special offers, and ensure you're the first to know about my new offerings. I offer private coaching as well as courses, workshops, and retreats, so be sure to stay in touch if you'd like to go deeper together. Thank you, loves. Have a gorgeous day. Ciao.